Welcome to the regular Half Moon Bay City Council meeting of Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. This meeting will be held entirely by teleconference. All council members and staff will only participate via the Zoom platform using the process. The meeting is being conducted pursuant to recent amendments to the teleconference rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act, allowing teleconferencing during a proclaimed state of emergency when local officials have recommended social distancing. This is AB 361. The purpose of that bill is to provide the safest environment for the public, elected officials, and staff, while allowing for continued operation of the government and public participation during the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting will be conducted via Zoom webinar, and live Spanish interpretation will be available within the Zoom platform. Members of the public are welcome to log into the webinar as attendees. During any public comment portions, attendees may use the raise your hand feature and will be called upon and unmuted when it is their turn to speak. You may join by telephone at 669-900-9128 using webinar ID 955-3561-4263. If joining by phone, use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. Victor, would you like to give the explanation of the Spanish interpretation this evening?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd gladly do that. Buenas tardes, Madam Mayor, honorable council members, Mr. Nisbet, Ms. Sangberg, city staff, and all public members of the public. Victor Hernandez, Spanish interpreter. Le queremos dejar saber a todos ustedes de los protocolos especiales de participación a distancia. Esta reunión se celebrará enteramente por teleconferencia. Todos los miembros del consejo y el personal participarán únicamente a través de la plataforma Zoom, utilizando el proceso descrito a continuación. La reunión se lleva a cabo de conformidad con las recientes enmiendas a las reglas de teleconferencia requeridas por la ley de Brown, que permite a la teleconferencia durante un estado proclamado de emergencia cuando los funcionarios locales han recomendado el distanciamiento social AB 361. El propósito de AB 361 es proporcionar el entorno más seguro para el público, los funcionarios electos y el personal, al tiempo que permite el funcionamiento continuo del gobierno y la participación del público durante la pandemia de COVID-19. Esta reunión se llevará a cabo a través de Zoom Webinar y la interpretación en vivo en español estará disponible dentro de esta plataforma de Zoom. Los miembros del público son bienvenidos a entrar en el webinar como asistentes durante las partes de comentarios públicos. Los asistentes podrán utilizar la función de raise hand o alzar la mano y serán llamados y se les activará el micrófono cuando se les toque hablar. Para acceder los canales de audio de español, usted haga clic en un icono de un mundo o un globo que aparece al fondo de su pantalla. Después de hacer eso aparecerá un menú y entonces podrá usted seleccionar su idioma en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Debbie, you're on mute.
Gracias, Victor. Could I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Jimenez.
Here.
Councilmember Brownstone.
Here.
Councilmember Rohrbeck.
Here.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Here.
Mayor Reddick.
Here.
You have a quorum.
So could I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brownstone.
Yes.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbeck.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose.
Yes.
Mayor Reddick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Before we go any further, City Manager Bob Nisbet would like to give an update on the Highway 92 traffic stoppage.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and members of the community. Yeah, for those of you who know, or maybe some of you don't know, Highway 92 is closed in both directions right now. As far as I know, it happened sometime in the 4 o'clock hour, maybe 4:15. It was a traffic accident. somewhere in between the city of Half Moon Bay and the reservoir. 2 cars, I understand. I don't have a lot of details beyond that, but on the delay, it is closed in both directions, and the delay is due to one of the vehicles running into a telephone pole. And I think the telephone pole is propped up by the vehicle. As soon as they extricate the vehicle, the telephone pole is going to fall down. And the key is getting AT&T in there to do what they need to do before they can open up in either direction. So I was just out talking to one of our officers at the intersection of Highway 1, Main Street and 92 just about 10 minutes ago. And the latest is won't be open until 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. So asking for patience. And if you're in Half Moon Bay and you had any plans to go over the hill, I would suggest you enjoy the council meeting for the next couple of hours. Matthew and I were attending the Board of Supervisors meeting on another issue this morning, and we did hear a speaker say just generally to the Board of Supervisors that SMC alerts seem to be spotty recently. This was just one speaker reporting that, but both Matthew and I took a note about that. And on this particular incident, I did get an alert. Mine came around 4:49. That's how I know it must have happened, maybe a half hour before that. But the comment certainly caught our attention, and I assume it caught the Board of Supervisors' attention too. So we'll follow up on that and see if there's something going on there. But there, as far as I know, there was an alert sent out, and hopefully they'll send a follow-up out when they know that what the approximate time of opening the highway will be. So I just wanted to get that announcement in since it's kind of a hot topic right now, and there are people. The traffic control looks great. Officers are out there, and obviously the options are either Highway 84 or north through Pacifica.
Yeah, so I got the SMC alert, but I will say that I've had very sketchy contact with them the last several months.
Okay.
So I've not been getting things that other people have been getting. So there might be something to that. So I would definitely keep an eye on that and let us know what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, we took a note of that. So we'll follow up on that. Thank you.
Thanks much. So the next item is public forum. Jessica, do we have any raised hands?
We do. Crystalline Geet.
Hello, thank you, wonderful council. I just wanted to let everybody know that the Coastside Business Development Center is open. So we are all set with our classroom and our meeting space. We have a form on our website that community members can fill out if they want to use the space and reserve it. And if you want to use it and it's available, we will do everything in our power to make that possible. It's hybrid ready, so people can teach classes here and far. It has 15 individual desks, so people are not crammed together. They have their own little laptop space, or we can do 25 seats seminar style. And then we have a board table that comfortably fits 8. You could squeeze 10 if you're all very friendly. It also has access to a kitchen if your meeting or class has snacks, and it also has access to an ADA accessible bathroom. So we feel good about it. We're ready and super excited to help the business and community members facilitate the things that will help them grow. And we always welcome feedback, and this is a learning process. And we heard today that the supervisors have committed some money to the Coastside for additional business services. So we look forward to helping the city work with them on how we can make that money go as far as possible on the coast. So thank you all.
Congratulations. Great news.
I have no other hands raised, ma'am.
Councilmember Brownstone, I noticed that you're unmuted. Did you have a comment?
No.
Thank you. All right, so we have a Mid-Coast Community Council update this evening. I'm guessing by Claire Touton.
It is by Claire Toutant. My pub trivia team is going to be starting back up on Tuesday evenings, so I don't know. It may not always be me, but for tonight it is. And let's see, a lot of things. We did have our candidates forum for the Board of Supervisors candidates and went very well. Mr. Booker was not able to appear, but the others did, and we had 50 or 60 people attending, which I thought was great. And at our last meeting, we did a couple of interesting things. We talked a lot about Highway 1 issues, particularly around Surfers Beach, because there's some thought of doing something different with parking and different with pedestrian crossing, which is always an issue. Along with that, we had a presentation from the Granada Community Services District about their plans for developing a park in the Burnham Strip, which there'll be more details about that coming out soon. But while she was there, Barbara Dye also gave us a presentation about the history of El Granada, which was very useful to put in the context of what's going on at Surfers Beach and in Burnham Strip at the moment. At our next meeting, we'll be looking at the housing element of the county plan. We're also going to be talking with the parks directors about parks issues, particularly Quarry Park. The Quarry Park master plan is now out, and we'll be taking a look at that. The airport, meanwhile, is starting a process to install gas tanks for unleaded fuel, and also to look at replacing their terminal building with space that would include room for community gatherings. The scoping project, which the Resource Conservation District has been spearheading to look at what the priorities would be for taking action to prevent fires in the wildlands, is due to submit its report in late June. And Caltrans is going to submit its repair guidelines for State Route 1 in mid-June. We did at our last meeting actually join Half Moon Bay's prior opinion of opposing variable message signs on Highway 1. We had previously supported that with reservations, but at this point we're saying that we just don't want them at all. That was due to public opinion. On June 2nd, there'll be a groundbreaking for the multimodal trail on the east side of Highway 1 between Coronado and Medio. So that'll get started and probably be finished by the end of the summer. And I think that's about everything. So I'm happy to take any kind of questions or comments.
You got a lot going on.
We do.
Great. Any questions for Claire? I guess not, Claire, but I'd like to try to make your groundbreaking on the trail.
I think I just saw the invitation, and I think you guys are invited.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have a presentation by the Resource Conservation District. Kellex Nelson is here, the Executive Director. I think that's the correct title. And Kellex, you're going to be talking about the potential expansion of the RCD. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me again. I know last time we focused on one topic, which was about soil health and climate mitigation on agriculture. Tonight, I'm hoping to talk with you about what the RCD actually is and what is being proposed in terms of boundary expansions. And I'm very happy to be here because I was the 5th car in line being stopped from going over 92, wondering how long. At one point I cut bait, went another way, and I'm glad to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see this? Is that working out all right? Yeah, great. And just kind of focus on this proposed change to our boundaries, which would include a lot of Half Moon Bay. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that before you. So just backing up for people who don't really know what the RCD is, we're an independent special district in San Mateo County that's not part of county government. There are about 100 RCDs in California, thousands more nationwide. And the first RCD in California was here in San Mateo County, formed in 1939. And that we are able to provide very diverse services across jurisdictions, across public and private lands to accomplish on the ground environmental protection at landscape scale and regional scale. So we are very much identified by being boots on the ground, and our main function is to help people help the land. And there are very diverse ways that we work. The one thing that's always the case is that we are non-regulatory and we do voluntary conservation, essentially working where we're invited. But we have many, many different ways that we do that. We connect people with the technical, financial, and educational assistance that they need to conserve and manage natural resources. We work directly with landowners and other interests. We coordinate assistance from all available sources, public and private, local, state, and federal, to develop locally driven solutions to natural resource concerns. And the way that it rolls out in San Mateo County is because RCDs were designed to evolve with the changing and emergent needs of people in our communities and the environment. Programs and different RCDs might look very different. It's not dissimilar from the Peace Corps, where there's like a mission, but the way it looks in Botswana, it might be very different from, Uganda or different communities, et cetera. So what we've heard from the community that we serve and the partners with whom we work is that these are the priorities. And so this is where we have focused in our areas on water quality and quantity and conservation and storage and climate, both adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Wildlife, largely focused on threatened and endangered species recovery, helping to ensure that there's viable local agriculture. Incidentally, we were formed by farmers in the 30s. And when we first began, we were essentially a farm services agency until the early 70s. And most recently, focus on forest health and wildfire resiliency. So some examples of what that looks like is we leverage federal, state, and county funding to remediate the chronic flooding in the town of Pescadero. That also, the same circumstances caused annual mass die-offs of threatened federally listed steelhead trout. We have been working on, at this point, over 2,000 acres of forest health and wildfire risk reduction projects across county parks, state parks, and private properties. We anticipate soon working on a 19-mile fuel break around the community of La Honda with 21 contiguous landowners, public and private. As Claire mentioned, we've been working with the community of El Granada and partners to try to identify some of the most effective opportunities to reduce the risk of wildfire at the wildland-urban interface. We typically try to reduce fuel loads and the risk of wildfire while improving forest health and improving biodiversity. And often this integrates with our other programs as well, having to do with habitat, water, et cetera. The unfortunate thing is that we were also called upon to respond when fire did occur. So after the August 2020 CZU Lightning Complex fires, we were very involved with reducing the risk of catastrophic erosion, with rebuilding water-related infrastructure, removing hazard trees, developing revegetation plans, engaging with the state around risk assessment to consider watershed process, not just infrastructure, et cetera. And just kind of stepping up and leaning in and helping the community in any way possible. When we were first formed, we were the soil conservation district. I like to say our roots are in soil because that entertains me. But that means that we really know a lot about dirt and water, frankly, dirt, water, and critters. And so we're often involved with preventing or addressing erosion, small and large. This is large. So this was a gully that opened up in one storm event. that went across county right-of-way and private property. And we were able to work across both to help the county protect its road and bridge and help the private property owner not lose more of their property. So this is an example of a larger scale erosion kind of project we work on, but much of it is very small, property by property. We've been very engaged in recovery of threatened and endangered species. I'm very pleased to report that this year, the National Marine Fisheries Service, a division of NOAA, the federal agency, awarded us. We're one of 9 of their partners across the nation that was awarded a Partner in the Spotlight recognition in their report to Congress for our efforts to help recover the most critically imperiled marine species. Particularly our work with coho salmon, and from all the habitat restoration and stream flow enhancement and such that we have done, one of the resulting outcomes was we were able to partner with them to release more than 10,000 endangered coho salmon into Pescadero and Butno Creeks in a watershed from which they had been almost entirely extirpated, were pretty much gone. So that was a highlight of my life. I actually made a presentation this morning, which I confess that there were not many dry eyes on staff about this one. This was very big for us. And then there's other critters on the coast: the San Francisco garter snake, California red-legged frog, coho, steelhead, marbled murrelet. We actually are a biodiversity hotspot, and there's an embarrassment of riches regarding protected species. And so we work really hard to try to make sure that they can thrive. I mentioned that we are supportive of agriculture. We work a lot with farms and ranches to be environmental stewards, environmental champions. We do not see agriculture as an impairment, but we see it as an opportunity and part of the rural economy and part of the rural culture, part of the aesthetic. And we work a lot with farms. In fact, if you haven't, I urge you to go to our YouTube page and check out the video that we posted from our Water for Farms, Fish, and People program, in which we're helping farmers conserve and strategically manage water resources so that improves their water supply reliability and drought resilience while improving the amount of water that's in the creek for endangered species. It's a real win-win. And I won't get into any detail on this. I'm sure there's some folks who are new to this conversation tonight, but some of you were here, the council members were here when I presented recently on the work that we're doing in partnership with others to develop site-specific plans on farms and ranches to draw greenhouse gases down from the atmosphere and store them in soils and vegetation with multiple co-benefits from drought resilience to habitat enhancement. And that with the plans that we've completed in San Mateo County thus far, the potential to sequester carbon, to draw carbon down and store it, is equivalent to if we added 2,400 acres of mature forest. It's really kind of extraordinary what can happen with these natural and working lands. And as I mentioned in our presentation to you last time, we worked with the county to add a new chapter to the Community Climate Action Plan that includes natural and working lands, and that we're eager to work with the city in your process right now to support any consideration of that as well. Much of our work, as I mentioned, focuses on water resources. So from harvesting and recycling rainwater from greenhouse roofs, like that was back when it was Nurserymen's Exchange, to helping cemeteries and row crops improve irrigation efficiency, county parks, state parks, campgrounds, homeowners associations, whoever wants help conserving and managing water, we're there to support that. Twice so far, this work has won the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Award. And as I think many of you, the point of engagement you have with the RCD with which you're most familiar is our work on water quality monitoring and water pollution remediation. The top left photo here, if you can see the colors, that's actually when we dyed Pillar Point Harbor as part of a circulation study, and then genetically tested the DNA of the bacteria entering the harbor as part of a study to understand the sources of contamination, bacterial contamination in the harbor. Had some pretty significant findings. And we run the first flush water quality monitoring event that the city of Half Moon Bay supports in partnership with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside and others. And we also then will work with individuals to try to address stormwater coming off their properties, whether it's harvesting rainwater, which has water runoff and pollution benefits, as well as water conservation and drought resilience, permeable pavers and driveways, stormwater, rainwater gardens, composting manure for confined animals or covering it in ways large and small. We're able to support people in improving the watershed scale runoff that enters the ocean and the creeks, because in this community the land-sea connection is pretty intimate. I'll just say it that way. And a lot of our work is with people. We help people help the land, and sustainable solutions to watershed management need to acknowledge that there are people here, people who have businesses, people who have livelihoods, people who have homes, and people who travel here to hike or bike or go camping. And balancing competing demands on limited resources particularly depends on people coming together and working across interests, across values, across languages, across political divides to enhance, restore, and share what everyone loves and needs here. We're typically seen as a trusted broker, and we honor and respect all the different ways that people live on and use these lands. So we help people within their value set. These are some of the groups that we work with. For example, the top left was a program we did, sort of tailgate outreach to different farms, working with farm workers on irrigation efficiency and water quality. The middle photo and the one on the right is what we call the Roundup on Roundup, as part of a forum that we hold to have difficult conversations about natural resource related issues that included ranchers, academics, environmental advocates, landowners. The bottom center photo is a workshop that we did with equipment operators in the Redwoods on best practices for equipment operation that protects natural resources. And the bottom left was a university group, local college, that we brought out to understand how stream systems work. This is just some examples of some of the folks that we might bring together. And when you put it all together, what it looks like at scale is resilience, reducing flooding, protecting water supply, reducing the risk of fire, sequestering carbon, restoring habitat for endangered species, reducing erosion, improving water quality, agricultural viability. All these projects have co-benefits and a watershed and ecosystem function that at scale across public and private lands, across watersheds in our region, provides and enhances resilience for our communities and for the natural resources. So that is what we do in a nutshell. And about that proposed boundary change. So the map that you see here, the yellow is our current boundaries. The green is what we are proposing to include. What we're proposing to include is our existing sphere of influence that was determined by LAFCO. So LAFCO recognized this, and now we're going through the process to formally change our boundaries. And you'll see, I mentioned before that when we were first formed in the 30s, we were just seen as a farm services agency, essentially. So you'll see that areas that were taken out, that were exempted, essentially, from our district are the areas that were subdivided where people live. Fast forward 80 years, and the way that we do work now, the statute that creates RZDs was changed in the 70s. We went from being the soil conservation district to resources conservation. And we now work on things like urban runoff and urban erosion issues and urban agriculture and that sort of thing. And so one of the things we want to do is close the donut holes. Ironically, our office is in Half Moon Bay, and Half Moon Bay is not in our district currently. And we provide extensive services to areas that are not within our district. And then we're also proposing going basically to Highway 280. This proposed boundary change would better represent our actual services and benefits and be consistent with the sphere of influence. It would better enable us to provide services at an appropriate scale. When you're talking about climate change, wildfire, species extinction, flooding, water pollution, you can't piecemeal that. It also helps us be contiguous and not divide communities, not part of Pacifica is in and part of it is out, that sort of thing. And be consistent with the changes in statute, catch up on a change that happened in the early 70s. This map shows, these blue dots show projects that we've done only outside of our boundaries. We're enabled in statute to do work outside of our boundaries to some degree. And so this does not at all touch on the total amount of projects or work that we've done. But in recent years, you'll see that a great deal of our efforts have been in the areas that we're proposing for inclusion. So some of the things that people have asked us so far, would this result in any new requirements for property owners, residents, businesses, or others? No. Would this result in any new restrictions on property owners, residents, businesses, or others? No. We are non-regulatory. We have no enforcement mechanism. We're here to help people. Would this result in any new fees or taxes? No. So a little bit about how we are funded. We receive a small property tax base, about $70,000 a year, which notably is less than the cost for us to exist. So for us to comply with audits, Brown Act, public records requests, government codes actually costs more than we receive from our property tax base. But we're a pretty good deal. We're a pretty good bang for the buck. For every dollar in fiscal year 20, last year that I did this analysis, for every dollar of property taxes paid, we brought in $149. That is a pretty good deal for folks in the county, folks in the district. That's a good rate of return. And what that looks like is largely state bond funds, typically about 60 to 70% of our budget is from state grants. Maybe 5 to 12% is from federal grants. And then maybe typically 8 to 15% is agreements with non-county local organizations. So for example, City of Half Moon Bay contributes to the First Flush program, or we have an agreement with the City of Pacifica to help with water quality monitoring, or the Harbor District, where we're their water quality partner and they pay us for that work. And then we receive sometimes funding from the county. Often the county contracts with us to do work on county lands or advance county objectives, that sort of thing. Some small amount from mitigation, and then some small amounts from private donors or that sort of thing. Since we function like a nonprofit, we actually have an annual appeal that goes out to donors. Not a lot of people wanting to donate to government, but I encourage you all to do it. And I'll tell you how. So the other thing that I think is pretty remarkable is the amount. I think I mentioned this before, we're very lean, and that only 7 or 8% of our total budget goes to administration and operations. Maybe 92, 93% goes directly to services and projects and assistance to people on the ground. So that was a quick and dirty of what the RCD is, what we do, and what we're looking at with this boundary expansion. That was a very high-level course overview, and there was a ton that I didn't say because I know that the more I say, the less people will hear. But I wanted to give you a sense of this and encourage folks to check out these different sites. Our website, our YouTube page is a really good place where we post videos regularly of being in the field or a webinar, this or that. And anybody can feel free to reach out to me directly at this email address. And then I'll stop sharing the screen and see if there's any feedback or questions.
Questions for Kellis, council members? I have Harvey, go ahead.
I was part of LAFCO that unanimously approved the expansion of the RCD boundaries last year. Certainly going to support it this year. One amazing thing to me was that during the CZU fires, RCD volunteers or people who deal with RCD actually fought the fire. That's not in their purview, but they thought it was really important, which it was. So that's just an example of how community-minded RCD is, and I think they're a wonderful organization. So thank you, Kellex, and thank you, RCD.
I see that Maz has his hand up.
Hi, Council. I just wanted to voice my support for RCD and just really wanted to thank them for everything that they do for the community. I've been privileged to sit in on a couple of meetings that they've been managing around the One Water Group, and just wanted to thank Kellex and her great team, and really look forward to continuing working with her.
He's referencing, we work together on a group that we call Coastside One Water that brings together all these different entities to talk about water as a shared resource. So, you know, whether it's County Office of Sustainability, City of Half Moon Bay, Granada Sanitary District, Surfrider, you know, anybody who's talking or thinking about water resources, whether it's wastewater, storm water, drinking water, really helping us all come together and work across all these different jurisdictions to think of this as one resource on the coast.
Yeah, and I just want to echo my fellows. So as a state employee at the Coastal Conservancy, I'm very familiar with the operations of the RCD and grants to the RCD. I'm very familiar with the high esteem that our particular San Mateo County RCD is held up in the hallowed offices of Sacramento, right? So our RCD is one of the best in the country. Certainly, you know, very high performing as an RCD in California. So I think I consider ourselves very fortunate to have their office in Half Moon Bay, and look forward to collaborations, because collaboration is the name of the game. You have a complex project, you need to bring people together. Nobody does it like the RCD. So looking forward to your expansion. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time this meeting and your last meeting. Any other questions for Kellex? I guess that's it. We'll see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Sure.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Very exciting. Okay, mayor's announcements of community activities. So I just want to mention that this Thursday at 11 a.m., we will be holding the groundbreaking for the Carter Park construction project. That's going to be Thursday at 11 a.m. at Carter Park. You can park at the Mariner Church next door. And there will be refreshments following the ceremony. Assembly member Mark Berman will be present. He was instrumental in securing the funding to complete this project. And I understand that the Half Moon Bay High School Jazz Band will be performing. So it's going to be a very lovely event. And then on Saturday, there will be the wellness fair at Cunha. That's going to be from 1 to 4 o'clock. Lots of booths, I guess, and various groups talking about their services, probably some refreshments, I'm guessing. So recommend that you attend the wellness fair this Saturday, 1 to 4. And that's all I have in terms of announcements. Our city attorney is here, but I don't believe that she has anything to report out because we haven't had any closed session for the last few meetings.
That is correct. Nothing to report out.
Nothing to report out. Great. Thank you. And then next item is city manager updates to council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of the community. I have a couple announcements, and then I'll turn it over to Matthew and Jessica, who have a couple items as well. So the first I wanted to start with is the first annual Wine and Jazz Festival that was this past weekend on Sunday. I just wanted to acknowledge the success of that event. You know, it was the brainchild, I think, of the Downtown Association, primarily Colleen Penny and a few others. And, you know, they came up with the idea almost 3 years ago, pre-pandemic. And that was obviously a bummer when they sold a bunch of tickets and then had to, one of the first events after the pandemic hit that was canceled, as we were still wondering how long this thing was going to last. And so a lot of patience on their part to wait 2 years on an event that was brand new and they hadn't even tried it yet, and then patiently wait and give it a go and not give up. And so I was there, Matthew was there. We were just kind of running around because we were interested in making sure it went well and was successful for them. And I'll just say, I was blown away. I heard they sold over 1,000 tickets. It was crowded, but not too crowded. It wasn't crowded. It felt very good. It had a good vibe. We closed down 3 blocks of Main Street. There was lots of tables. There was jazz. The music was incredible. I'm a jazz lover, and I thought the music was outstanding. I heard the wine was good from various people, and it was just a great event. So I hope it went well for the organizers, because I have a feeling this will continue if they want it to. So I hope that they did well and it was not overwhelming for them. But it does seem like it will provide a nice bookend to our summer. And of course, we have the Pumpkin Festival coming back in the fall. But the timing of this in mid-May just seems like the right move, and it really connects to our recovery efforts and coming out of the pandemic. So just cheers to them to putting on a great event. And one more person I want to acknowledge. So Matthew and I were kind of running around, and the city did have a table set up in McDutra Plaza, and one of our superstar Park and Rec commissioners was there, Paulette Eisen, and she actually sat at the table the entire time. Matthew and I joined her, and we were chatting with her and having fun and, talking to all the people that showed up. But Matthew and I were also running around because we were, interested in what was going on. And Paulette was there the entire time and just sending out good vibes and giving the good message of all the good, cool things the city's doing to all the people that were there, because it was mostly people from out of town. There's no doubt about it, that came to our city. And the word must have got out because the mayor of San Francisco was also there, London Breed, and she seemed to be enjoying herself. She was sitting in the 3rd row, taking in the jazz, drinking a little wine. And so the word had definitely got out about this festival. So just kudos to everyone involved. Great event.
Hey, Bob.
Yes,
I'm sorry to butt in, but we would be remiss if we didn't also acknowledge our public works team. Our maintenance workers were out there very, very late the night before, and I'm assuming pretty late the night after, and putting in a lot of overtime. Just really appreciate all their efforts. And then, of course, just the coordination with the sheriff's office, the Coastside Fire Protection District. It was a team effort spearheaded by the Downtown Association, and I think super successful for the community.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. So great all around. My second announcement is, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors meeting this morning. I mentioned earlier that we were watching that meeting, and that's where we heard the comment about the SMC alert, but we were watching it for another item. So they did have an item on their agenda today where they basically allocated or conceptually programmed the second tranche of their ARPA funds. So as you know, the city received ARPA funds, all cities did, but ours are small in comparison to what the county receives. I think so. They received 2 baskets just like us, one for this year, one for next year. I think their allotment for next year is like 87 million, something like that. I can't remember, but it's a big number. And so they were basically pre-programming the money. They still have to approve their budget in June, just like us. But at that meeting, they had many buckets where they were allocating the funds: housing, mental health, recovery, just all kinds of things. But in there was a line item for $2.5 million to promote what they're calling an economic advancement center, a center for small businesses and workforce development in the city of Half Moon Bay. And so, we were really impressed with that. We've obviously been doing some work behind the scenes. And, I was chatting with Matthew and Karen and Erica as this was all kind of coming to fruition, and we were amazed at what we were seeing. And I said, wow, it seems like we're getting lucky a lot lately here at the city. And Matthew said to me that there is no luck. Luck is a combination of preparation and opportunity. So I think Matthew and Erica and Karen, have been doing a lot of good preparation as well as your city council, of course. And I'm talking about the CRY effort, the Coastside Recovery Initiative, because that's just obviously coming back in spades, and we won't even know how much, this is the beginning. But clearly that effort and connecting us to the county put the city in a position, for them to think about this. And we don't know the details, but I
Walfred has 16 years of local government experience, having served previous agencies such as the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, the Los Angeles City Clerk, San Mateo County Elections, and the City of East Palo Alto. In addition to his clerk and elections experience, he has experience in communications and is bilingual, and so he will complement the communications and city clerk department well. He lives over the hill with his wife and 2 daughters and visits Half Moon Bay frequently with his family. He's eager to be a part of the team and support the city as we continue to grow and serve the community. And I look forward to him meeting everyone and
Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you, everybody.
Glad to have you here. Would you like to make a few remarks?
Sure. I'm just happy to be working for Half Moon Bay. I think I was just thinking about it. I first visited the city in '97, and then 15 years later, when I first moved over to the peninsula, I wanted to move over to Half Peninsulas because there's a bit of love for the community. There's a bit of love for what the coast offers. And so I want my children to grow up around this area. So I'm just really happy to be working in a city where I want to be in too.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you.
Welcome.
Okay. I guess, Matthew, do you have an update? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will make these quick. I just have 2 announcements I wanted to make. The first is in regards to the 50th Annual Pumpkin Festival, which is coming up this October, and a special project that the city is working on in relation to it. A little bit of background. Most of us know about the Pumpkin Festival. Here's the website URL, and it'll be held October 16th and 17th of this year. It is the 50th annual Pumpkin Festival. It's not the 50th anniversary because obviously it had to be canceled the last couple of years, but excited to have it back and supporting the community and celebrating the 50th. You'll see the logo here for this annual Pumpkin Festival also includes a picture of our Johnston House. And we've learned recently that this year is the 50th anniversary of the Johnston House Foundation and the work that they've done to restore this building. So pretty cool year. We'll be coming back with more information about that as well. A little bit of background, the Pumpkin Festival was organized by the Beautification Committee, the Main Street Beautification Committee, which formed in 1971. Some of our residents noted that at that point, our Main Street and our downtown were starting to be a little run down and be a little shabby, and they were looking for a way to spruce it up and find funding. And so they organized this event. The original event was about 15,000 people. We know it's grown more than tenfold since then in attendance. And it's really an important event to support the downtown, the beautification of the downtown, and all the work that the Beautification Committee does in both visual improvements and events for the community. It obviously boosts the local economy through tourism, and it's a huge windfall for local nonprofits fundraising throughout the year. And so they're, I'm sure, excited to have it back. It involves hundreds of coastside volunteers, and it's one of California's oldest, biggest, and most popular festivals. Just a few images to remind us of what Pumpkin Festival looks like. Obviously, the parade is very exciting. The booths and all the opportunities to eat great food and buy crafts. The Great Pumpkin Way Off, which usually happens on Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and then the carving of the pumpkins. And in the upper right-hand corner, a crowd favorite always is the performance of the high school marching band. So this year, the city is moving forward with a project to help commemorate this special event and support a beautification of our downtown. And the wonderful owners of Cunha's Country Store have agreed to allow the installation of a mural on the south-facing wall. As you can see in the picture here, this is the wall that is on Kelly Street facing MacDutra Plaza. We'll have to do some tree trimming and work to reveal that wonderful old sign up at the top and to create a bigger palette for this hopefully beautiful mural. And we hope to have it in place before the Pumpkin Festival in October of this year. So the process is we're currently in an RFQ, or request for qualifications for professional artists. I'll share a little bit about that on the next slide. And once we've narrowed that list down, we'll actually have an RFP where selected artists will submit designs. The design of the mural will be advised through the community, through various sectors of our community that will have important thoughts and influence on what this will look like. Per our recently adopted public art policy, our Recreation Commission will review the submissions and make a recommendation. And you as a city council will be making a selection of the mural and approving moving forward with the project, hopefully in early August. And so, as I mentioned, we're currently within the RFQ process. It opened last week, and it remains open through June 2nd. Our hope is to find a local artist, or at least an artist that's familiar with either the San Mateo or California coastline. Based on the feedback we've gotten, I don't think we're going to have any problem finding somebody from the coast to do this work. And there's a URL at the bottom that you can go to look at the RFQ and submit. You can also reach out to Victor Gaitan in the city manager's office, and he has done incredible work to pull this together in a very short amount of time. And we're really blessed to have his expertise. He's done this work in other communities in San Mateo County. And we're grateful to the council for their willingness to support this. We think it's going to be a great way to honor the work that's been done through the Pumpkin Festival, and it's going to create a massive piece of public art to brighten our downtown, right in the heart of the downtown. So very excited about that. The other item I wanted to quickly announce is this coming Wednesday, not tomorrow, but the following Wednesday, May 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. is our monthly Recreation Commission meeting. And on the agenda is a review of the updated concept design for the Smithfield Master Plan project. As a reminder, going back the last year, a community member has given interest in donating support to rebuild the parking lot and some other amenities at Smithfield. And so we decided to move forward with a master planning project. And what we're really pleased is the new concept design park. It will retain the baseball fields. It will retain that history of use and the love of baseball that takes place here. But it will add, over time, a lot of new amenities that will truly make this into a community park. So we invite people to attend the meeting on Wednesday and provide final input following this meeting. Any final input will be incorporated and we'll be back before you as a council, hopefully in June or early July, to share that the finalized concept and hopefully get your blessing to finalize the master plan. The agenda has not been published yet, but if you go to hmbcity.com and scroll down to the citywide calendar, you can click on the link there for the meeting and get the agenda and a link to join the meeting, and that should be published by Friday. And that's all I have.
Lots of good stuff going on. Moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any items council members wish to pull?
I'd like to pull item E, please.
Okay. Can we have a motion to, in a second, to adopt the consent calendar minus item 1E? And I would recommend that at least the titles, if not the text associated with them, be read into the record so that people know what it is that we're approving.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar minus item, was that 1B as in boy or 1D, Harvey?
1E.
Oh, 1E. Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Minus 1E. So that would include 1A, waiving reading of resolutions and ordinances, 1B, accepting warrants for the month of April 2022. Item 1C, subcontract agreement between Advocates for Human Potential Inc. and the City of Half Moon Bay for grant funding for the Crisis Assistance Response and Evaluation Services Program pilot. Item 1D, display of the LGBTQ+ progress flag for the month of June 2022 at City Hall to commemorate LGBTQ History Month. And item 1F, accepting a quarterly financial report for the third quarter of fiscal year 2021 through 22. Item 1G, accept the treasurer's report for the quarter ending March 31st, 2022. Item 1H, receipt of legislative position letters. And item 1I, re-ratification of a resolution to continue holding public meetings remotely.
Roll call, please.
A second.
Oh yeah, we need a second.
I'll second.
Councilmember Brownstone,
Yes.
Councilmember Jimenez,
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose,
Yes.
Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, so we'll move item 1E to the end of the agenda. And move to item 2A, adjustments to cost of services schedule user fees for 2022-23.
Well, that is me. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here tonight to go through the adjustment to the cost of the service schedules. We have a few updates. We have a new fee that we'd like to bring before you. So let me share my screen. Sorry, let's see. Okay, is that work? Does everyone see it? Okay, Catherine's thumb up. That she's right in my line of vision. So tonight, oh, and of course it's not moving forward. Sorry. Okay. Oh, no, still not. There we go. I apologize. So tonight I will go through a little bit of background, talk about the purpose and the scope, go through our recommendation and next steps. And then, of course, we do have to open the public hearing so that there is an opportunity for the public to speak to some of the changes we are proposing this year. So we mentioned this a lot, but it's just a good reminder that in 2017, the city adopted a comprehensive update and did a nexus study for all our fees in the city of Half Moon Bay. And while we haven't done one since 2017, we will be looking at potentially proposing to do one in this next fiscal year to assure that we are moving along at the rate we need to be and making sure that our rates are meeting the needs of the city. Of course, you all know that most fees are at 100% cost recovery rate, and that actually is part of the establishment of the fee. So under the state law, the fee can't exceed the providing of the service. And under Proposition 26, which was approved in 2010, the new fees must fall under one of 7 exceptions to ensure that all new charges are within the definition of a legitimate fee rather than a tax. So that has to be very clear when we're actually putting these together for you. Also, staff has constantly reviewed our fee schedule just to ensure that these legal requirements have been met. When we are looking at our development impact fees, which are also called AB 1600, these are fees that are imposed in connection with the approval of a development project for the purpose of defraying all or a portion of the cost of public facilities, that's our cost, related to the development project. So these fees are supported by a nexus study, which again, we did in 2017, and hopefully shows that there's a reasonable relationship between the fee and the development on which it's imposed, and between the need for public facility and the type of development project against which the fee is imposed. So while the city, again, completed its nexus study in 2017, we plan to update it again in 22-23 fiscal year. And we also conduct a special audit for a special annual audit for the reporting of our AB 1600 fees. Also, I want to make a special note that these fee adjustments do not address property related fees, such as sewer fees that are subject to Prop 218. So also in addition, procedural requirements apply when we're doing this, and before approving certain new or increased fees, a city must provide certain notices and hold a public hearing, which is what we're doing tonight. This update that I'm going to share with you actually does bring forth a few new fees and amended fees to help implement a couple of city's new ordinances. Oh, sorry, going backwards. So some of the things that we changed this year, we are now ready to actually put in a professional dog walker permit fee. This will assist us in managing our coastal trail and a lot of the public walkways throughout the city, and ensuring that when professionals are out there walking more than 5 or 6 dogs, that they are registered and permitted to be able to be out there with these dogs. Finance will be working closely with Public Works to develop a program and a permitting process so that the public can actually participate in this and make sure it's easy enough so that people can come in and get the questions they need answered. What we're also requesting tonight is we are installing a new replacement fee for the Poplar Parking Pass. That's quite a mouthful. It seems that we've had a few people call in and have lost their parking permit early on in the course of the year. So in order to just recoup some of it, to avoid potential fraud, we are now instilling a $35 replacement fee for these parking permits. Also, our hourly billing rates are going to increase. We are actually keeping them in line with our cost of living increase, so they will be adjusted 3% to actually match the cost of living fee that the staff got, because these are actually, they're usually consistent with the cost of living increase. And we use the CPI West adjustment to most of our fees, and this year that was 6.5%. Development impact fees. John and Maz are also here in case we have any further questions about this. So this is a fee that's usually based on the average annual California construction cost index. However, this year, due to inflation, the index was approximately 26%, and the year goes from April to April. 26% is significant since last year it was 3%. So after much discussion and contemplation, we decided to actually bring it in this one time at the CPI West amount. So we are raising these fees 6.5%, which is another reason why we feel it's time for a nexus study to make sure our fees are in line. And of course, we understand the significant impact this could have had on development, including some of the housing projects that we're going to begin working on. And we want to make sure that we are actually still a viable place where people can come in and develop projects, and especially the housing that we're all looking forward to. And last but not least, one of our new fees is the sidewalk and parklet activities fee. In line with the approved coastal development permit, activities programs are flat fees are now going to be imposed for compliance review and the fee rates for subsequent license agreements. This was done out of community development department, and unfortunately Jill's not here, but I'm sure John and Maz could help if there's any specific questions about these as well. So next steps, the new fees are 60 days until implemented, which would mean they will be implemented on July 16th, 2022. This is actually why we went earlier this year. As you probably recall, we usually go at the same time as the budget presentation. This year we decided to go earlier so that the fees would not have to wait until August to actually be implemented, or actually it would be September if we went in June. August. So also the fee and deposit increase based on CPI would take place July 1st. Oh, sorry, that's 2022, not 2021. Our recommendation is obviously to conduct a public hearing as soon as I'm done speaking, and then by resolution, authorize the adjustment to the cost of services schedule for the fiscal year 2022-23. And that is my presentation.
Okay, so this is a public hearing, but right now, council members, if you have clarifying questions, staff can answer those, and then we'll move on to the public hearing portion. I'll open the public hearing. Questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. And Jessica, if you could see if anyone has their hands raised.
No hands raised yet. If we have anyone who would like to comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature. Not seeing any comments, Mayor. You're still muted.
You're muted, Mayor.
I'll bring it back to the council for consideration. Public hearing is closed. Anybody? Motion?
I move that we conduct a public hearing, adopt a resolution authorizing adjustments to the cost of services schedule user fees for fiscal year 2022 through 23.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Jimenez?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes.
Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you to staff for the background, the regulatory background on the fees and everything. That was appreciated.
Thank you.
We're moving on to resolutions and staff reports. Item 3. The item is operation of e-bikes and other devices on trails and paths. This is a study session. And we will hopefully be prepared to direct staff to return to the council on June 21st with a draft ordinance amending the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code. Staff. Ready for the staff presentation?
So I was so excited. I had my item up and I forgot to unmute and put my video back up there. So there we go. In any event, thank you, Mayor, council members, community, for the opportunity to present this. I'm thrilled also that it's kind of early enough in the evening that I think we can have the kind of communication and conversation that's necessary for some of these issues. And I can say that this is one of those things that we've just sort of struggled with to get to the point of bringing to the council. And I'm happy and thrilled to be here with the assistance of Moz, Jonathan, particularly in our office, to help us get there, and the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee as well. With that, it's not advancing. Any ideas? Sorry. I'll just, any idea why this isn't advancing? Gosh. Let me go back in and, sorry, after all of that.
And maybe, John, we could have someone else share their screen for you and just go through it for you if it doesn't work.
Let me go to the other.
Try again.
Let me go to the other. I had it on two different screens. Let me go.
That's
sorry, all. Let's see if this one works better. Let's see. All right, we'll try that one. Try. So tonight again is a study session proposed to talk about e-bikes and other electric devices, and particularly as they relate to use on paths and trails. And you'll note the focus tonight is really on the three paths and trails that we have: the Coastal Trail, the Naomi Patridge Trail, and the East Side Parallel Trail. But this also would eventually apply to any new extensions and expansions of those, but also any of those tributaries that we develop, such as the trail along from Higgins Canyon to Johnston House, for example, and some of the other areas that we'd have. So this ordinance would look to apply to those equally as well, but primarily tonight, because they are the focus of our trail and path system for bikes and other devices, we are focused on those. This has been an issue for some time. In 2016, state law changed, and electric bikes and other particularly electric devices were removed from the vehicle code as being motor vehicles. And so for years, we proceeded along a basis of the idea that any and all of these kinds of things were motor vehicles, and therefore it was pretty clear. And our ordinance 1048 basically in the municipal code basically says that, hey, you cannot operate motorized vehicles on these trails, paths. Well, in 2016, that really was wiped clean, and we have been struggling, I think, ever since to come to terms with what this means and how we proceed with this. The BPAC has been actively involved in this conversation. They also, for some time, have been actively involved in sort of a secondary parallel running conversation with regard to sort of rules of the road, whether we put posted speed limits, how do we get people to behave better, nicer, and recognize that it is a multi-purpose trail, particularly the coastal trail. And then we have areas in particular that have pretty congested use there, particularly at Poplar, between Poplar and Kelly, which I think I'm saying what you all know. And so that will be looked at and followed as a separate conversation. So tonight, I'm trying to keep focused on primarily the use of the vehicles, where we think it makes sense to deal with that. How do we then craft the ordinance to address what the council and the community wishes to do, and then follow that at a later point with some of the other issues that are out there, including speed. So this is looking at addressing a host of motorized vehicles, including e-bikes, e-mountain bikes, motorized scooters, motorized skateboards, and motorized boards. Hope you had a chance to look at the staff report. What I'm going to tell you is that the recommendation page is going to be a little different and I think a little better on the PowerPoint, and I'm going to suggest we use those as a place to look at sort of any direction that you wish to give. It is been a challenge. So basically, we have now a whole host of motorized vehicles that were not around very long ago, and these obviously include the mono wheels, the scooters, the e-bikes themselves, skateboards. Segways have been around a bit longer, but all of these sort of have a unique place in California state law now, and require a conversation about how and where we approach addressing and regulating these.
What is a motorized board?
Sure. So a motorized board is basically something like this, the mono wheel. It's also certain things that are out there that don't seem to look like this. So state law, I didn't do it, but state law basically distinguished between scooters, skateboards, and all the other things that might come along. But segways are treated differently. So they're not even grouped into that. And I'll try to talk a little bit more about state law and why this is more challenging than I think it was ever intended, or probably should be. And this was a fun conversation with Catherine to try to figure out what positions were. But basically, that's the challenge. They created the distinction. We have to try to make it work. So again, the focus of this is really on these three distinct areas, but it would involve the future tributaries and some of the other tributary areas that we have, such as the connection underneath Highway 1 between Strawflower, for example, and some of these other areas. I would note also here that in the state parks area, actually the state parks area of Half Moon Bay, State Parks retains authority there, and enforcement authority and regulatory authority. So while this shows the coastal trail, for example, going through Half Moon Bay State Park and the beach areas, they ultimately retain control over that. So in this instance, when we talk about the coastal trail, what we really have control over is southerly from Kelly Avenue into and including basically the Ocean Colony area with that. And I will say there remains a little bit of question as far as where the Coastside Land Trust portion of that, although my belief is that the requirements and the conditions attached to the funding for that work included probably provisions that they meet all of the public standards and access, but we'll need to look at the conservancy requirements and talk to CLT about that. So what we can say tonight definitively is we're talking about the coastal trail from Redondo Beach in and through Ocean Colony to the south, and then obviously from Seymour Bridge to Kelly Avenue, and then you're looking at the rest being state parks and then connecting into San Mateo County. Now, what I can tell you is that San Mateo County and state parks allow class 1 and 2 e-bikes on their trail. And it's a default position because California state law basically says unless you adopt a regulation ordinance to prohibit class 1 and 2, they are allowed on a bike and pathway. So just to be clear, right now, those are permitted on all the way up through and including Princeton Harbor down to Kelly Avenue. And the fact that we have not actually adopted a prohibition at this point on our portion of the coastal trail really means that we allow class 1 and 2. We wanted to bring this tonight in part to clarify and just make sure that that was the position of the council and the community, that they should be allowed. And then obviously there's a conversation that goes along with that regarding class 3 e-bikes in particular. And I won't bore you with this. It's in the staff report. I show these pictures only to reiterate that it is very difficult to distinguish between these. When you're looking at them, there is very little to distinguish between a class 1, class 2, and class 3. And that really does make any enforcement that might occur extremely difficult, because really the only way you can tell is, one, if somebody's going over 20 miles an hour, then they must be on a class 3. Or perhaps a souped up class 2, I guess, but basically it means it's a class 3 because they can go up to 28 miles per hour. The other piece of that is you can look at the tag on it and it will distinguish whether it's a 1, 2, or 3. But there is a pretty big distinction really between class 3 and the class 1 and 2, and that being that the class 3, you do not have to pedal at all. You can completely run and operate that vehicle, that bike with the hand throttle, and you can reach speeds of 28 miles per hour. And again, electric mountain bikes basically fall into the class 1 because they're designed for mountain usage and dirt usage. So they're not designed around heavy speeds. But again, to try to be clear about that, we've included the e-mountain bikes as well into the mix. So our municipal code 1048 is a bit outdated. It was adopted in 1983, and it was sort of a different world then, obviously. And it was really designed to keep motorcycles, mini bikes, dirt bikes, dune buggies, and other kind of small, gasoline-driven motor vehicles off of the paths and trails in the city and off of sidewalks and everything else with that. Obviously, in 2016, as I mentioned, state law changed. Electrification has become a much more popular and available. And we're here basically recommending revisions to this chapter to basically modernize it and update it, and also to look at the potential of adding a new section 1049 to really deal specifically with the electric types of vehicles. So again, I mentioned this, I won't go into great detail, but basically the California Vehicle Code did create a class system with 1, 2, and 3. And right now, it prohibits the use of class 3 e-bikes on the recreational trails and paths unless the public agency with jurisdiction chooses to permit them. So right now, doing nothing, class 3 e-bikes are not allowed on any of our paths, trails, anywhere in the city. So that can be and could be where you want to leave it and stay there. And by doing nothing would preclude those from being all there. Then again, the public agency may prohibit. So this goes back to the issue of basically you would have to take an action, specific action to prohibit class 1 and 2 e-bikes from those same trails. So so they made it interesting and challenging for us because on one hand, they said you have to take a definitive action to do so. And the other, it is a permissive unless you take that right away. So as I said, at this point, Class 1 and 2 e-bikes are allowed on our on Coastal Trail, Naomi Patridge, and the East Side Parallel Trail by the fact that we have not taken an action to prohibit them specifically. And I say that only because they are no longer classified as a motor vehicle, and our 1048 only references to motor vehicles. It does not deal with the new E classification system. So it's a roundabout way to say there's a lot going on here, and I'm trying to do the best I can, and I'll certainly take questions and try to answer. And Catherine has been studying up on this as well, but I told her that I'd try to be kind to her tonight. So electric scooters have a special section in here and basically allow them to be, again, a may be operated on those unless we prohibit. So again, right now, these electric scooters are allowed unless we prohibit. I won't say obviously, but I'll say this, that we still have the right and authority to grant a license and allow any kind of commercial use of these, which we've seen through the last several years grow. So we still would have control over that, but right now individual folks have the authority unless you choose to prohibit or limit in some other way. And I want to be clear here that Segways themselves do not fall into this motorized scooter definition, and they fall under a different category, which is the same as a motorized wheelchair. We are suggesting that we clarify that the Segways be allowed only on the paved surfaces. We've had some issues at Poplar and along the Coastal Trail where a Segway was being used and in the mud and creating ruts and creating problems. So we are suggesting in the ordinance that we do talk about that. And then comes one of their favorite issues, which is the lack of clarity coming to motorized skateboards and motorized boards. And suffice to say that this is one of probably the poorest state regulatory drafting that Catherine and I have seen, but I'm sure there's worse, but this is bad. In that it says you can adopt these rules to deal with it in 21,967. But then it goes into, but shall not be propelled and allowed on certain things with this. What we really have landed on in digging through this is that we believe the intent and clarity here is that the state was calling basically a motorized skateboard, for example, as a gasoline, and distinguished that the electric skateboard is different and not considered a motorized. So that's why I've highlighted the gasoline under the 313.5. So in a nutshell, while we're still doing some research and we're still talking to other agencies, we do believe that in the end, the intent was to allow the city to adopt rules that would allow these types of devices on your paths and trails, but you should do that if you wish to do that through an ordinance and through the revisions as what's being proposed tonight. We are also suggesting that we prohibit any of the gasoline. If nothing else, we think that the council has made a very strong statement toward electrification and not having a proliferation of additional combustion engines. So that is one that we think across the board is one that that we would suggest and recommend. So again, we're here and attached to the staff report were a couple of draft runs at some of the potential revisions and everything with this deal. You'll recall that we've brought up at times ordinances, and part of the challenge that came with that is we'd never had sort of a study session and a conversation with the council and the community about what that ordinance said. And so we're trying to do this in the way I think the council asked us to do, which is to come and talk about it, hold the study session. Yes, we put together a draft ordinance, but it's only to sort of see how that draft ordinance might look down the road. And and we're not set in stone with anything with that, and we want to make clear to the council and the community that way. And again, you know, changes have occurred, technologies have changed, and the world has changed. And it seems the community is asking us questions about whether they can ride these various devices on the trail and the paths. We've also had community members concerned about the proliferation of these types, particularly, you know, skateboards, scooters, out among particularly the more congested areas like the coastal trail in the area between Poplar and Kelly Avenue, and mixing with all the other activities and bikes and walkers, baby carriages, all the things out there. So I'll walk you through just what you found in the staff report, but a little more detail to this, just in the context of what we think are your basic options and what our recommendations could be, and also sort of where there is some room for consideration. I've been talking a lot, and I before I get to these, maybe any clarifying questions might be good. So rather than wait until I've gone through the recommendations and then have questions about any of this, I'll leave that to the mayor and the council.
Okay, so let's take clarifying questions first. The vice mayor had her hand up first. Vice Mayor?
Councilmember Brownstone had his hand up first, and I have no clarifying questions. I definitely have things I'd like to say, but
okay, well,
it's not clarifying.
Well, let's reserve council, comments and deliberations for after we open it up to the public. Robert, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. It kind of matches the sky in your background.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it does. I didn't even notice it up. I put it up first. Thank you. Yeah, so John, first of all, John, thanks for getting this all up on slides and helping folks understand. I think some of the things you said at the beginning, enforcing this stuff is tough. And someone telling the difference between 20 and 28 miles. There's enough issues, just people on bicycles who wait till they're right up on you. I ride a lot on the trail, and finally you hear on your left. By that time, someone going 20 miles an hour, by the time they say you're on your left, they've already potentially created a disaster. My question is this. So yes, most of the congestion is on the paved parts of the coastal trail. It's flat, and that's where you'll find people with dogs, baby carriages, people spread across the whole trail sometimes because they're not wary of all the traffic going on. And what I wanted to clarify was anything. So, it's really not that complicated. We are an agency that can allow or prohibit anything on the part of the trail between, anything basically south of Kelly. And then north of Kelly, as I understand it, would be controlled basically by the state, that part of the trail. So my basic question is, does that then mean through collaboration with the state, we do have an opportunity if we decided not to allow certain kinds of electrical bikes, that we might be able to work with the state to also ban it on the trail? Because it seems to me to be pretty weird. All of a sudden the trail hits a point where people aren't allowed to have electrical bikes if we decided not to, and then the state allows it. So I'm just wondering if part of this, looking at the big picture, is there an opportunity that the state might work with us if we didn't want to allow all electrical bikes that are now currently generally allowed by the state. Is that a clear question?
Yeah, absolutely, and a very valid one. And I would say that adding San Mateo County and Princeton Harbor makes even more sense to include in that mix if we're going to collaborate and try to modify that, as the coastal trail basically, provides that pretty unbroken connection between Princeton Harbor and all the way to the ocean colony area. One break in there, but it is still a pretty continuous, and hopefully will be a continuous stretch through there. So yes, I think it's possible. I think if you ask my my true opinion and thoughts on that is, I think it's going to be a very difficult and uphill battle, simply because I think the state of California itself, in drafting these provisions of the California Vehicle Code, basically said that they believed that Class 1 and 2 bikes were really e-assist bikes, and that when you look at it from the perspective of who does that help, that helps some of the folks that are less capable of riding their bike, maybe less able of walking, all of those things. And I think that there is going to be a challenge pushing those folks to change a position where the state said that unless you adopt something specific and prohibit, then they are allowed. And so we are going to ask them to all adopt ordinances to align if that's what the council wishes to do. So I think that is going to be an uphill battle and challenge. And I also think that you'll find resistance among the community as well, who have invested significant amounts of money in these bikes, both within the city and outside of the city. That's a separate issue, but I think that's a reality in the mix to that. But yes, that's what it would take. My opinion is it's going to be an extremely difficult proposition.
I just want to add to that, the Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission are all about maximizing public access to the coast. So, if they believe, and I believe they do, the Coastal Commission, that assisted devices will help those with various infirmities to actually, utilize the coastal trail, which is state funded, they're going to support it. The Coastal Act and Coastal Commission are all about maximizing access to the coast. So if we appear to be, restricting access to the coast, that's going to be a problem. So it's not just.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just also remind folks too that we have an interesting connection point coming. The County of San Mateo is just ahead of us in developing the linkage from Murata Road north to Granada Elementary School on the East Side Parallel Trail. And we're working toward connecting there and ultimately connecting entirely all the way back along the east side of Highway 1 to North Main Street. And so that's going to be another point where the county's provisions would conflict if you chose to say take a different position on that trail as well. So I think it's important to at least acknowledge that there is that jurisdictional shift as well. But right now, there is only the city involved in any conversation regarding Naomi Patridge and East Side Parallel Trail. But there is soon to be a point of jurisdictional conflict there if we so choose.
Councilmember Brownstone, did you have your question answered?
Yes, thank you very much.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you. Great presentation, thank you. I have a couple questions. I don't have an e-bike, but I'm asking a question for a friend. You said, I don't know, you might be able to answer this question. E-bikes, class 1, 2, and 3, are they expected to make a full stop on our streets? Do you know that answer?
A full I'm not understanding the question.
I think, did they have to abide by all vehicle codes? And the answer is yes.
Yes, their e-bikes are allowed anywhere on the streets of Half Moon Bay, but they are, as any bicycle, required to comply with the rules of the road.
Because I mean, I see a lot of bicycles, a lot of e-bikes, especially on the weekends. Especially around downtown area, Main and Kelly Avenue. And yes, asking the question. So yes, we need to be able to educate our community that if you have an e-bike, especially a 3 class, a class 3 e-bike that go a little bit faster than a regular bike, they're expected to make a full stop and a complete stop at every intersection for safety. And also another question about the trail. I know the hotel behind Joe's restaurant, I think they offer bicycles, e-bikes, for the guests. And there's no trail. I know we have talked about, it's been brought up about the trail that ends at Cameron's to be completed all the way to Miramontes Point Road for Cañada Cove, residents or Ocean Colony for the guests at the hotel to be able to safely ride their e-bikes or bicycles on the side of Highway 1. Is there any update on the piece of the trail missing from Cameron's to Miramontes Point Road?
Well, yes, I'm. The extension of the Omi Patridge has been on the is in the plans, is in the bike ped master plan and is there. It is that section is going to be challenging because of all the driveways and crossings and everything, which have been problematic as we look at the area down in Belleville and some of those areas. And it's why we've had a lot of folks say, I just won't ride and use the Naomi Patridge Trail. So we're a bit concerned trying to figure out how to cross all of those. I am, what I'm going to tell you that at this point, we are also looking at the East Side Parallel Trail south. And in fact, there is a call for funding, and we are preparing a grant application for an active transportation planning grant to look at a study for actually looking at the East Side Parallel Trail from Higgins Canyon Road down to and through and including to Moon Ridge. And that's something we're looking at actually for the east side. And our thought processes, both of them are on the PED bike plan, but frankly, it probably makes somewhat more sense, particularly given the opportunities we have now through the connection at South Main Street across into the Naomi Patridge Trail. And so those things. So we are looking at working on that and at least studying that. So we're looking at both of those things and are looking for funding. But I will say at this point, we are focused on trying to make the connection on the north end just to complete that section, because you're going to see a large section completed with the Highway 1 North project. You're looking at extensions that have been made there near Frenchman's area there, Rousseau Francais, and we're working on and looking at connecting in with the county's project all the way to Granada Elementary School. So the idea there is then to be able to connect in to the south as well. So those are projects that we are in the process and looking for and submitting in grant applications for the East Side Parallel Trail South as well.
Thank you. No more questions.
Vice Mayor, do you have another question?
No questions.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to see if there's public members who would like to comment at this point.
Mayor, did you want to go through recommendations before you do that or after?
No, go ahead. Go through the recommendations.
All right, thanks. I'll try to be quick through this. So e-bikes, obviously, our recommendation, my recommendation, and really from the BPAC was to be consistent with the other agencies and to acknowledge that Class 1 and 2 should be on the California Coastal Trail. We also believe that they should be on the Naomi Patridge and the East Side Parallel Trail and basically all other paths and trails, just in light of the fact that they are considered by the state and have been basically acknowledged as being e-assist in their nature. At this point, we would suggest following along what the other agencies have done, which to continue to prohibit Class 3 e-bikes on the California Coastal Trail. We do throw out a possibility, not necessarily a strong recommendation, but one that you could allow the Class 3 e-bikes on the Naomi Patridge Trail and or the East Side Parallel Trail. And there is a reason for that recommendation, being that there is provision in the state law that says that the Class 3 bikes can and be allowed on trails and paths within existing rights of way. And of course, the Naomi Patridge and East Side Parallel Trail are both located within Caltrans Highway 1 right of way. Now, as particularly, I would say the East Side Parallel Trail becomes more of a reality, there will be more and more walkers, I think, in that, and there may be conflicts with that. And so down the road, we could evaluate that, and or you could choose not to include the Class 3 on that section of path and trail. It's your call. They are allowed on Highway 1. Again, I know Highway 1 can be challenging, but the Class 3 bikes are allowed on Highway 1 and along all the other public streets around. So those would be sort of the basic there. And again, as I said, the ordinance that we would look to bring back to you would apply basically equally around to all of the extensions and expansions of trails and paths. We may have to come back at some of these paths and trails to tweak those again. Particularly Class 3 e-bikes, I think, have to be one of consideration on that. So it comes to electric scooters. We absolutely feel that you should prohibit the gasoline-powered scooters or what's, on all the paths and trails. And in light of your climate change and climate action goals. We suggest that you may wish to prohibit them on the coastal trail, but again, permit on Naomi Patridge Trail and East Side Parallel Trail. Again, one of my hopes is that we can get the Naomi Patridge Trail and the East Side Parallel Trail being better utilized. And if we allow some of these other uses on there, we can start to get people shifting there and maybe de-emphasize some of the folks off of the coastal trail and maybe get rid of some of the congestion there and allow the visitors and our residents to enjoy that a little bit more. Again, that's a policy action. Take that. We also thought that one of the areas that's come up with the BPAC, it's come up tonight, is the concern about the congested area between Kelly and Poplar on the coastal trail. And certainly one of the things you could do is preclude these from that area. Again, it would create a break sort of in the issue of where you would allow them on the coastal trail perhaps. And we're still at this point trying to figure out exactly where the state and where the county is with regard to their provisions regarding the scooters, the skateboards, and all of these things. And we've been trying to figure out whether they're just sort of a don't ask, don't tell, and don't enforce, or whether they've actively adopted. And so we're still working on that. And I think that may have some bearing on decisions and recommendations that you might make as well. And we understand that. And then clearly you could also just prohibit them altogether. State law does seem to allow that, and we could just say we're just not going to have these. They're just not the right thing on our paths and trails. And I would probably say that's pretty draconian, and I know there are people with these that would probably like and enjoy them and dealing with that. And D probably is not a recommendation that would come first in our list, but basically A and B probably would be our preferred if you're asking for staff's kind of position on that. but C has some merit, and we know how congested it can get there. The electric motorized skateboards, and again, the distinction between those and other boards is challenging and inferent, but there is a distinction in state law. Again, we would recommend prohibiting gasoline-powered skateboards, and much like what we were pushing forward with some options with the scooters, is one could take those same kind of positions with regard to where and how you deal with that. Again, our I guess recommendation would be to probably look at B and C, which would be to prohibit on the coastal trail, and particularly B, but to allow on the Naomi Patridge and Eastside Parallel Trail. And again, we can come back and revisit that once all the connections and issues are dealt with on the with the Naomi Patridge and the Eastside Parallel Trails. But those again are suggested. Again, one of those to declutter a bit of the coastal trail at Seymour, between Seymour and Kelly. And again, D is pretty draconian. It's available. It's not one that we would push forward to you strongly and recommend, but it is an option available to you. And then motorized boards, hoverboards, the uni wheels, mono wheels. Those are the things that they basically distinguished as being different in the motorized boards. And basically they wanted to distinguish, I think, these from particularly the gasoline powered skateboards in particular, if you really sort of look at what was going on. Again, very similar recommendations on that in terms of the policy, in terms of where, how, and when you wish to look at these issues out there. We do know from the BPAC conversation that there are folks in the community that regularly use these and who are concerned about any kind of prohibition or regulation of these, particularly on the coastal trail. And clearly from their conversations, they're using them all along the coastal trail, regardless of whether they're in the city's jurisdiction or the state parks or the county's jurisdiction. And, but again, this is within your authority to do so. So basically that concludes those kind of basic policy recommendations. Our hope tonight is to get some direction on this. While I think the community needs clarity on this at some point, if there is a discomfort and anything and everything with this, we can come back and talk again. Or we can start to work on an ordinance and bring that forward again for a conversation. So we're open to however the council, what their comfort level is in terms of moving forward with any and all of these policy recommendations. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, John. I'd like us to take public comment at this point before deliberation. So my proposal is we take public comment and then maybe take a 5 to 10 minute break and come back to give direction. Jessica, do we have any hands raised? Would you like to ask the public to raise their hand if they'd like to comment at this point?
Yeah, we have 2 hands raised so far. And if anyone else would like to comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. Our first speaker is Emma.
Thank you so much for allowing me to address everyone here. And what I wanted to just reiterate is I really do recommend the continued use of pedal assist bikes, the whole complete way of the trail. What wasn't brought up is the fact that many people use these bikes to commute to and from work and to mitigate the traffic issues on the weekends. So a very important consideration. We welcome the expansion of the trail and look forward to that. But absolutely, this is mitigating our congestion, our traffic. So thank you for considering continued use of pedal assist bikes on the complete coastal trail.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jimmy Benjamin.
There. Okay. Good evening, council members, staff. Nice to see you all this evening. I won't repeat the mayor's comment about coastal access. I suspect that's right. In addition, I suspect that it changes the intensity of use, and so would probably require a coastal development permit. Former Commissioner Evans, when we were working on the trail program, observed that it was people's experience on trails had a lot to do with whether they were moving at the same velocity on the trails. So since the e-bikes obviously create a certain ability to move fast, just as regular bicycles do, we have to develop a common understanding of what speeds we think are appropriate. And so independently of the technology, speed limits may be an appropriate, if you'll pardon the double loading, vehicle for thinking about how we want to permit trails, permit uses of our trails. I wonder if there are other agencies, maybe the city of Pacific Grove, where there are similarly narrow trails where we can climb their experience curve rather than having to invent our own. It seems to me that speeds in particular on unpaved trails may need to be different for vehicles that have the potential to do a lot of acceleration or move quickly. So on the perpendicular trails that connect neighborhoods to paved trails, it may be that the answer would be to ask people to walk their e-bike or pick up their monowheel or something so that they're not damaging the trail and creating erosion or damaging coastal resources. I think we've all had the experience of watching the guy who photographs for Seahorse Ranch on the coastal trail. I shudder to think of what it would be like if we had a bunch of those trying to travel on that narrow path at the same time. So I think there is a density problem. Things that might be okay with a small number of vehicles could be very different for a large number of vehicles. So we need to think intelligently about how we're going to manage our coastal trail resource to its capacity. And that's difficult in the model that we have of saying yes or no in an area that gets this much demand. There's more I could say, but I think I'll just lay off there. I tossed enough bombs in. I really appreciate the fact that people care about this, and I want coastal access to happen. But we need to do it in a way that we're not putting our citizens at risk, and if there's some liability, putting ourselves at risk if there are some bad accidents. Thanks for taking my comments this evening.
Thanks, Jimmy. And our last speaker is Mike Ferreira.
Good evening. Very interesting conversation. I've been involved in similar conversations for several years with MROSD and state parks in Santa Cruz County. In fact, Sierra Club sued state parks in Santa Cruz County in the 1980s over just bicycles, not electric bicycles. The disputes are intense, and I would have to say personally that I find the Bay Trail to be a lousy experience for walkers because you get the engineers on break trying to go as fast as they possibly can on regular bikes, not even powered bikes. And basically they scream at you to get out of the way so that they can set some new record. I would also say that you could learn a lot by talking to MROSD. They've spent a lot of money, a lot of studies, and they've conducted tests and pilots, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a very deep discussion on that board. Lost count of the number of meetings they've had on it. It's very difficult. And I fully support the trails on Highway 1. That's a transportation trail. It was always intended to be, the parallel trail was always intended to be a transportation trail. But I've always felt that the coastal trail is not a transportation trail. It's to enjoy the coast. And some of the harshest arguments I've seen on Nextdoor are bikes versus walkers. Forget electrics. There was one guy that threatened to wrap a bike around somebody if he came close to his kid again. So it's not a minor issue. I would advise against trying to move too quickly and reach out to some of these other agencies to see what they've learned. They've spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and they're still debating the issue. I'm really glad that you brought this forward. I would suggest that if you get a glimmer of where you want to go with this, might be a really good idea to put it on the ballot and see what the citizens of the town would like to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
That concludes public comment, Mayor.
Okay, so I'd like us to take a break, a short break, 5 or 10 minutes. What do you think? 10? Looks like most want a 10-minute break. Okay, we'll see you in 10. It's 9:11. to the meeting? People are just trickling back. I just want to acknowledge Nicholas Laskovich, who is also doing Spanish interpretation this evening, along with Victor Hernandez. Let's see, we've got Harvey, Robert. Waiting on Joaquin. And Mr. Dowdy, are you back? There's Joaquin. Okay, so I'd like to just propose a process so we can wrap our minds around all these, all this information and recommendations. And that would be to first allow council members to ask any additional questions they might have, and then proceed from there with deliberation. So Deborah, I know you've been chomping at the bit to start the discussion, but I'd like to start with any additional questions. I know that I have a couple. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, so I want to be more clear on what it was the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommended on these items. I know we have a staff recommendation, but could you, and maybe I missed it, maybe you said so and I missed it, but I'd like to know what the BPAC recommended.
So the BPAC, thank you, Mayor, council members. The BPAC was very clear and very on the fact that they felt that continuity and consistency with class 1 and 2, particularly on the coastal trail, made sense. And I think much like the conversation tonight, the BPAC conversation tended to focus on the coastal trail. Despite, you know, Naomi Patridge and the East Side Parallel Trail being in the mix, it just tends to be the community focus, understandably so. It's a critical piece of our community. They struggled with the class 3. You know, they heard from at least one party who basically said, look, I have a class 2 and a class 3. I use my class 3. I just don't speed with it. Former member of the BPAC, I will say, with that deal. But you know, and they were persuaded by that, yet they just didn't really end up taking really a position on it. They were clear on the 1 and 2. They heard from several individuals at that night. They were folks that were in the Miramar area, I believe, Granada, Miramar area. They weren't city residents. That shouldn't mean anything necessarily, who were concerned about the issues of the skateboards and the motorized skateboards, the scooters, all of those things, whichever way you want to classify them. And again, the BPAC just didn't have a strong answer and recommendation there. So the reason why you didn't see a really affirming and a firm recommendation is that they struggled with this, as I think you are probably individually across the board maybe struggling with in terms of what's the right mix and what's the right feel for this. They had, as a group, taken this up at least 2 other times with a different constituency of folks. And I think at that time, clearly there was still this class 1 and 2 distinction that they felt strongly about. I think there was a stronger point to class 3 under the prior arrangement. And I will say this, this last meeting we had in January with the BPAC having a conversation about this was really the first time that we had introduced really the boards, the skateboards and all of that into the mix. Maz joined us. Maz basically is the main staff liaison to that group, and he obviously wants to add a little bit to that, so I'll let him.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I just wanted to add. Yeah, I just wanted, through the mayor, I just wanted to add that the last Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting, there was a conversation about the types of devices, but ultimately the question became whether the type was the important issue or the speed of which the folks are traveling. So that was where some of the input that they provided was that maybe we should consider looking at the speed limit and maybe not so much as far as the devices, but that there was no overall consensus other than looking at these different alternatives and going through the process.
Thanks, Maz. And I would absolutely concur that has been a conversation for some time with regard to just management and speed control and I mentioned that up front in the conversation, which is that there really are two parallel conversations occurring in this that occurred at BPAC, and I'm assuming probably tonight in the same way, which is about the types of vehicles, the types of uses, and then also the speed of those and the activities of those folks.
I would just, that's useful information. I would just say, you know, in the future on issues like this, it would be helpful if the members of these groups are, you know, prodded to actually make, you know, concrete recommendations. It's great that they're having a conversation about it. But we would like to know, you know, in the end, you know, you're an advisory body, advise, you know, yeah. Give us something here. My other question, actually I have two more. Did the Parks and Recreation Commission have a chance to discuss this policy?
We did not route this through the Parks and Rec Commission process. We wanted to bring it here to start a policy conversation. We're certainly open to taking it back and conversing with them. But we just were kind of interested in seeing where the council lands in terms of some of these major policy issues that ultimately come back to you and you have to make that decision with.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. And then, so say we decide to do more information gathering, consult with Parks and Rec, look at what, you know, other people are doing. Robert mentioned talking further with state parks and, you know, county, et cetera. In the meantime, we're subject to the state law on these items. So in the meantime, 1 and 2 are allowed on all of our trails. Okay, I just want to make that clear for everybody. So it's not going to, you know, just because we don't make a decision doesn't mean it's not, you know, some of these things are not legal. And so, and state parks didn't take a position, and that's why 1 and 2, class 1 and 2 are allowed on the trail in state park zones. The state of California, they're just going under the state umbrella rather than like the state Parks and Rec, you know, board making some decision on policy.
If there's a question there, we have not gone to the point to determine whether that state parks just said we're going to do this, or whether state parks themselves adopted or established that they were going to take a policy position that was allowed 1 and 2s. So we don't know what their position was, whether it was a default or an active choice to do so by state parks. Okay. We just know that that is the status at this point.
All right. Councilmember Jimenez.
Thank you. I have a quick question. You know, we do work on a policy about e-bikes on the trails. I mean, to me, all those e-bikes look the same. How do we plan to enforce that? If we're having a hard time enforcing, you know, off-leash dogs, alcohol at the beach. So how do we plan to enforce, you know, no e-bikes on the trails? What is the plan on that?
Well, again, our recommendation wouldn't be to not allow all e-bikes on the trails, but that's a place you, in theory, could land. But enforcement is a difficult issue for us. The sheriff's office is our primary enforcement authority. As you've discussed when we talked about the action plan for the beach and for our beaches, there are obviously some enforcement authority given to staff, but again, you know, that's been a choice financially and policy that we don't have rangers. We don't have an active enforcement authority there other than through the sheriffs and joint and mutual aid with state parks, with Mid-Peninsula Open Space, for example. In certain circumstances, there's mutual aid situations there. But for the most part, we have a very loose control. And the bottom line is that there are a lot of laws that aren't actively enforced, as you noted, and many folks violate the vehicle code on the state highways as well. I probably pass some of them, and I get passed by some of them as well, for one instance, and you know, enforcement is limited. So.
And if I could just underscore what John's saying, yeah, very difficult to enforce, and we would need additional resources if we chose to change our enforcement, whatever we have now. And at this point, we are not. We're preparing the budget for next fiscal year, and we are not recommending any additional resources that could be used for this type of enforcement for next year. So I just wanted to, underscore the point. We do not have the resources to enforce, and it's very difficult, as John mentioned.
Councilmember Brownstone.
So we are now in deliberation stage, right?
Well, actually, I was going to ask one more question.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me know when we're in deliberation. I'll wait.
Consider this part of deliberation, but my question was going to be, do council members feel, that the issue was raised, like maybe, we haven't consulted with Parks and Rec Commission, maybe we should talk to state parks. My question to you all would be, do you feel you have enough information tonight to give direction to staff? Or should we be discussing what additional information or what additional consultations we'd like to see done? I don't actually see this as an urgent matter, given that we're subject to existing, state law and vehicle code. But I would say before we actually try and give direction, are we ready to give direction? So that's what I would put to you, Mr. Brownstone.
Great. Well, that was one of the points I did want to address. I was very curious in terms of what Mike Farrar was talking about, how MROSD has a wealth of information and studies on this issue. I would love to hear from them of how some of these issues have played out in other areas. I think, there's some very interesting questions. I mean, there's the access issue for some people who might not be able to easily ride a regular bike. I got all that, but we're balancing a lot of this also, against public safety generally and enjoyment of the trail. And I think this whole issue around speed and the issue, the council member Jimenez brought up, it might be hard enough to tell the difference between a regular bike and an electric bike. I sure as heck know how you could tell the difference between type 2 bike and the type 3 bike, as it's going speeding by. And I think we could put up all the speed limit signs we want. Basically, I think it's impossible to enforce, but that's why I'd like to hear from some folks, maybe from MROSD, and see how does this work and how do you keep, people from being reckless. You already have people who are reckless with bicycles, but I just think this would exponentially increase potentially, dangerous behaviors. I like everything that John had up there, basically prohibiting electric skateboards, mono wheels, and scooters almost out of hand on our trail. And then really focus in more on the bicycles. But yeah, I don't know if we really are ready. It would be great to get more information how other jurisdictions have handled this similarly. And because maybe there are some solutions around enforcement. Right now, it's really a big question mark in my head. And the trail does just, on crowded weekends. And sorry, I remember when I was a kid, the opportunity to ride something electric as fast as I can on a trail would be, boy, would I have loved to have done that. So it's kind of hard to control, fun human behavior that could, on a congested trail. So I just think it's something that we need to get more data on and be able to have more perspectives. Thanks.
Vice Mayor, the question is, do we have enough information to give specific direction tonight?
I agree with everything that Councilmember Brownstone said. I think it's imperative that we gather information. The work that's gone into this issue so far has been monumental, I can tell. I can tell because I know that the questions, each and every one of the questions involves getting answers just from 4 or 5 staff people to begin with, and then to do the research that needs to be done. So it's incredibly difficult. And I also believe that it is incredibly important. And I don't want to rush it. I do have a thought that I want to put forward when we think about what sorts of things we're looking into. And that is, our 2 public speakers put it very well. Emma said, please keep the electric bikes. I need them for commuting. She did not say, I need them because I like to be out on the coastal trail and look at the flowers and listen to the birds while I'm on my electric vehicle. She said, I use them for commuting. Please don't stop. E-bikes. Mike Ferreira then made a tremendously good point. The East Side Parallel Trail and the Naomi Patridge Trail are transportation trails. That's what people are going to use so that they can get from Princeton Harbor to Moonridge. They can get from work to work, from work to school, from school to home. The coastal trail is for everyone's enjoyment. And that means little kids. That means people in their 90s who are using walkers and can't hear, they're deaf. That means everybody. That means large family gatherings, large groups of people that want to be together. The coastal trail is for looking at the ocean. It's for smelling the flowers. It's for looking at the hawks and the other raptors that are so plentiful. And I want us to look at separating out this issue into 2 geographical places. Let's look at what we want on the coastal trail, and let's find out from the public, are we right? Is that what the public wants on the coastal trail? And then look at what we want on our parallel trails, on our highway-bound trails, on our school-to-home-to-work trails. So that's my input.
Councilmember Brownstone, can you allow Councilmember Jimenez to speak since he's not addressed this question yet? We can come back to you. Okay, Councilmember Jimenez.
I don't think I know. I completely agree with both Vice Mayor Penrose and Councilmember Brownstone. I don't think we're ready to deliberate. We don't have enough information. And Vice Mayor Penrose brought up a good point, about what Emma said. There's community members that use the trail for commuting. It's not going to be until we offer something else, the parallel trails of Highway 1, that we can implement policy about the beach trails, for safety. I know there's students from Granada that ride their electric bikes to school, to the high school and to middle school. So they have to use it for commuting. People that work, I know people in Half Moon Bay that work in restaurants in Granada and Princeton use electric bikes to go to work. So it's not going to be until we offer, those transportation, trails parallel to Highway 1 until we can implement a policy like this about, electric bikes on our trails. It is a problem for safety. I do see the electric bikes on the trails. I haven't seen one, going too fast, but I do see older community members using those bikes for assistance, while riding the trails, and they go fairly, a good speed, not too fast, not too slow. It's a safe speed. I've seen that. But I have to understand, what Emma was talking about. And yes, it's an issue. Sometimes, some specific times during the day, the people do ride their bicycles on the beach trail a little bit too fast. They're not enjoying the trail. They just go there. They just for the speed. So, we have to be, but we have to offer something, for the commuters on Highway 1. And then we'll be ready to deliberate.
Thank you, Councilmember Jimenez. Councilmember Brownstone, we can come back to you now if you have additional comment?
No, I have nothing additional. Thanks.
Councilmember Rarback, do you have anything to offer here? You're muted, Harvey.
Thank you. I agree. We probably need more information before we can make an intelligent decision, but I strongly urge what John was saying, that we do prohibit gasoline-powered vehicles on all the trails. I think that makes a statement about where we are concerned about the environment. That's what I got.
Thank you, Harvey. At a minimum, I would want to prohibit all gas-powered vehicles, and in fact, I don't want some electric vehicles on the informal trails that link Railroad Avenue down to the Coastal Trail. They're already doing it. E-bikes are taking those informal trails between Railroad Avenue and going down to, the Coastal Trail and Poplar Beach. That's got to stop. And that's a whole other discussion about the problems with these informal trails. But so I concur, with Harvey on that. I don't think it's enough just to talk to MROSD. I mean, they're, a recreational trail agency. A lot of their trails are unpaved. And I know, they've been dealing with conflicts on, their trails for as long as they've existed, horses, dirt bikes, whatever. So, but I don't necessarily see them, as the expert. I want to talk, to other, coastal communities who are, have a lot of visitation, have coastal trail, what are they doing? I think we need to get some comparison. And, if we do take ourselves seriously as a coastal visitor serving community, under the Coastal Act, we should be prepared to do the work that's necessary to collaborate with other, with neighboring jurisdictions and authorities. So I think we should be talking to state parks, what's going on. We should be talking to the county, both in relation to the Coastal Trail, and the East Side trails they develop. I don't know about the Harbor District, maybe. And I think we should be hearing from our Parks and Rec Committee. I know most of those people are heavy duty cyclists. Most of them have e-bikes. I'd like to hear what they have to say too. So I think this is an opportunity to focus attention and get some experience collaborating on the Coastal Trail. I agree with the Vice Mayor. I know that staff has done a really, deep dive on the policy side, done a lot of work with the BPAC. I don't fault that at all. We've got some great information here going forward, and the presentation tonight was awesome. It made it so much clearer for me. But I think we need to just, reach out, do a little more outreach, and find out, what are people doing. I do think though that I don't support the idea at all of having different regimes, different, management regimes along the coastal trail on the coast side. The state parks are doing one thing, City of Half Moon Bay does something else. I'm totally against that. People want a seamless experience. So the user experience has to matter. So it's not just seeing the ocean, it's having, the seamless enjoyment of the entire stretch. And in fact, the whole framework of the coastal trail is, the goal is seamless recreation along the entire California coast, from Crescent City to Tijuana, basically, right? So we don't want to interfere with that. We don't want to throw obstacles in that way by having, patchwork of policies. And we do want to allow those who are less physically able, have limitations, to be able to access the trail and the coast. So there are some overriding principles for me here. But, I think there's a way we can work on it. And I think the distinction between transportation trails and recreational trails, is really important. And, we're working on, trying to get a grant for, nursery workers to get e-bikes to go to work, so we have to look at this as a piece and then not just little things. I do think I have a natural opposition to those board thingies just because I've seen them. They're clunky. They take up a lot of space. And the people using them are kind of not totally in control. And they don't look like it to me. And I agree with Deborah. I see a lot of families, parents and small children, or small children who walk and some in a stroller, just walking and enjoying. Then you have somebody coming up behind you, going 30 miles an hour. It's not a good experience. So I would agree with those that say, let's talk to Parks and Rec, let's talk to MROSD, let's talk to other cities, let's reach out to state parks in the county, so that we can get a better feel. I mean, I think we could probably set policy tonight if we wanted to, but I just don't, I don't feel like we've hit the sweet spot yet in terms of information. Vice Mayor, you're muted.
Yes, I just wanted to bring up the fact that because this is such a huge, this is a really important, difficult ordinance, probably the hardest one I've had to really think about since I've been in council, and one where there are so many different things to look at. It also involves a large number of our population. And I'm wondering at what point we should be considering getting some public input, just from the people that use the trail, just from our citizens. It's a question. I don't know when, but I think it's important that we have that. The question is, when do we have it?
So, maybe Parks and Rec Commission members would be willing to go out, on a weekend, or even like an evening, a weekday evening where you see a lot of families out there walking, and just do a survey, or do a fast poll, on the city's website or something. But I see that our esteemed Public Works Director would like to speak. John?
Esteemed. I don't know about that. I just, first of all, from a staff perspective, we were fully prepared for this likelihood, and this is not in any way seen as anything but you folks doing due diligence. So there is absolutely nothing with this. We just wanted to get this issue on the table and folks to be thinking about it. And to move it beyond just the BPAC and staff talking about it to this point. And we thank you for your time. I think Bob probably will respond a little bit to that. I'm happy to work with our folks to look at some form survey, monkey survey kind of situation there for the community. I think we did a very good job when we did the Poplar Complete Street. I think we did a really good job with the parking pilot. I think we can get some information pretty quickly, pretty easily, and allow for a broader deal. And I think part of that will be also identifying where people are coming from and what their thoughts are. The challenge with that, I think, is just getting the visitors in terms of their input. And that may be something that we can look at in a different way out at that site. The other thing, I'll just say this in terms of just a technical perspective, in terms of the speed limit stuff, one of the things that Moz and staff have been looking at is the idea of these feedback speed limit signs. So it's not just the speed limit signs with the white and black, that it's actually a feedback that says, hey, speed limit 15, 12, whatever the number may be, and this is what you're going. So with the radar stuff, and we think that's probably the only way that you start to get that issue addressed, with people getting that immediate feedback. So that's something that we're looking at. And I think I'll just say this, as we are sent back to look at some of these things and do the research in terms of what those other areas, I think that we can take a better look at the other package of the management and the speed limit issues and some of those things, so we can bring that, and so you can look at it in the context of a whole package, rather than having to parse this out into two kind of distinct pieces. So I think that's the good part about any delay in this, is it allows us to get to the full picture out there. So I'll shut up. Bob, take it over and correct me.
Well, with respect to others, I do see Councilmember Brownstone and Councilmember Penrose. Would you like to go next, or would you like to have the value of my comments before you go? Either way.
I just have one question. And did Mr. Dowdy mean to say that we might have electronic signs on the coastal bluffs?
I think he meant ones that do tell you how fast you're going.
It is a possibility.
Electronic signs on the coastal bluffs.
A small sign that flashes back.
Flashing electronic sign on the coastal trail. Thank you. I appreciate knowing that.
It's an option.
Or on the East Side Trail or the Naomi Patridge Trail.
Yay.
Councilmember Brownstone.
Yeah, well, this is a study session, and wherever we go with this, and what you're about to say, I strongly support. I think this is really important. I think the coastal trail defines the delight of living in Half Moon Bay, and for tourists, et cetera. And I think that having a study session, maybe separate study session, to really inform both us and the public. So then, we make just an incredibly well-informed decision about something that's going to affect our future enjoyment for years to come, because there'll be more electric bikes and more devices and et cetera, et cetera. So let's get ahead of this and, get a sense from, our local community as well as visitors, what really makes it enjoyable. And so, yeah, I think it's worthy of a separate study session at some point.
Moz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to thank you guys for the comments. I think this is really important for us as staff to listen and hear. And that was really the intention of tonight's item. And in my mind, this is also part of the conversation with Caltrans as they move forward with their multi-asset project, looking at highway 1 improvements from Wavecrest to Moss Beach. So I will be sharing this information with them as well. And so we'll continue having that conversation with Caltrans, because I am curious how they would be proposing to make those improvements with the potential for the additional bike facilities along the corridor there. So thank you.
Moz, I'm glad you brought up Caltrans. So here's another thing to keep in mind. So, there's just a ton of money in the revised state budget for active transportation. Meaning, bike thingies, trails, paths, all that stuff. And, it's like $700 million. It's close to $1 billion. slated for active transportation. And, there's a big demand for it. And the thing is, we're going to have to look, when they're reviewing grants, they want to make sure that we're not unduly restrictive, right? They don't like it when you overly restrict people's access to recreation or anything really. The whole thrust of state leadership now is equity. It's giving access to people with physical limitations. So we want to make sure that we're competitive for these grants, because grant makers do look at the policy landscape, see what people are doing, and you'll have to say, did you run this by your bike ped committee? Did you run it by your Parks and Rec commission? All this other stuff. So we just want to keep the grant landscape in mind as we're formulating policy, I think. And the other piece I just wanted to mention is how important education is. Anymore, people just resist any kind of boundary. People litter, they throw garbage, they don't pick up their dog poop, they resist any admonishments to change their behavior. It's a jungle out there. So education's important. Education can be expensive, but it's got to be a piece. It's especially hard educating tourists. We're sort of doing a lot of great litter pickup, but it's like end of pipe stuff, and it's not like changing people's behaviors. So it's a struggle. Bob, you still have your hand raised. Did you want to?
I do. Thank you. Yeah, I do have 4 or 5 comments that I would like to make. I just wanted to hear from everyone else first on this. So we will do all those things in terms of doing more research, looking at comparable jurisdictions, bring back whatever information we can. I think the direction was clear on that. Everyone knows I worked for an agency before I came here, the East Bay Regional Park District. I did live and breathe this for 5 years. So that will be our first comparison, because that's all I did pretty much for a portion of my career there. So they grappled with this 5 or 6 years ago, and it was not easy. And we went through the whole thing there. And the Park District was extremely resistant to e-bikes at the beginning, and eventually tried to pilot, and eventually threw the towel in. And to the mayor's point, one of the main reasons they eventually threw the towel in was because they found that there absolutely were grants that they would not be eligible for if they prohibited e-bikes. And so that is part and parcel with the state changing this law and encouraging pedal assist bikes. And so that was one of the reasons. And then the second reason was, I think the Park District finally just saw that the genie was out of the bottle, and you were not putting this one back in the bottle. E-bikes are not going anywhere. They're proliferating. They're everywhere. They're getting cheaper. They're getting lighter. And they did find through a survey that it really was important to listen to children, elderly, and other folks that had challenges getting around, and that also became a key pivot point for the Park District. A couple other comments. We will go ask state parks. John already answered that question to Councilmember Brownstone, and then he said it, but he warned it would be an uphill battle. I will just underscore that. I think it will be a more than an uphill battle. It'll be climbing the Salesforce building, probably. So we will ask them. We will do that. We were asked to do that. But for 2 reasons, they will be extremely resistant. One, the point John made, the state has spoken on this, and they are a state agency, and I don't see them for the same reasons going against that. And then the second reason is, in terms of exceptions, they are notoriously resistant to making inconsistent rules in the state of California. So they would definitely not do something in San Mateo County and keep pedal assist down in Los Angeles County. They are completely resistant to having inconsistent rules. So that would be the uphill battle on that. Speed limits were mentioned. So we will look at that and see what others are doing. At the East Bay Park District, it was 15 miles an hour on all trails. That existed before e-bikes, and they stuck with that. We can certainly look at that, but from my experience, 15 feels and seems, from my experience, to be the right amount. And if that's not currently in our ordinance, then that would obviously be part of what we would bring back to. As John mentioned, or I think Maz mentioned, the discussion at the BPAC was centered less about class 1, less 2, and 3, but more that we should have speed limits. And even if we can't enforce them that well, it's important to have, and it doesn't matter what bike you're on, you have to go 15, you can only go 15 miles an hour. I wanted to make a comment again back to my East Bay Park District experience. This is a huge issue on the Bay Trail. For those of you that know, there's a desire to have a trail that circles the entire bay, over 500 miles long. About 2/3 of it's completed. And the same issue applies there on steroids. There's probably more than 50 jurisdictions that have control over certain parts of the Bay Trail. My understanding there's an entity, the Bay Trail entity, I think that's under ABAG, that they were trying to accomplish the same thing and set standards so that class 1 and class 2 would be allowed, even though any jurisdiction, any city could come in and prohibit, right? And then be inconsistent. But my understanding when I left 4 years ago was that they were moving in a direction to have consistency on the Bay Trail, so all class 1 and class 2s were allowed. So I just wanted to make that comment. Enforcement, we already talked about. Very difficult to do. So when we come back, we'll emphasize that. We can create the speed limit, we can do all these things, but I just wanted to underscore the previous conversation we had about enforcement. And East Bay Regional Park District, who has police officers, probably 40 police officers, does not enforce. They just don't, it's not a priority. So they just can't do it. So that just gives you an idea how hard it is. And then finally, 2 more comments. I'll make this brief on the commuting. Certainly to emphasize the East Side Trail and the Naomi Patridge Trail as commuting trails and the Coastal Trail as a recreation trail makes sense. That's how they operate. And we can designate that, in different ways. And obviously, if we prohibit class 1 and class 2 on the Coastal Trail, then that's what it is. You can't use it. But I would just suggest, and we will also bring this back, people may commute on the Coastal Trail now for a couple reasons. One, the East Side Trail and the Naomi Patridge Trail are not complete yet, and they may not be complete for a long time. So I would still consider that commute corridor dangerous for a bike. And 2, even though you're commuting, a lot of people still like the nice scenery of the Coastal Trail while they're commuting to work. And so, yes, we could prohibit them and say, hey, you guys need to commute along the highway. But I think you're going to hear from people that say, I commute and my preference is to commute on the Coastal Trail because it's just a nicer experience and it's safer and it's more beautiful and it's not as loud. So something to consider there. And then final comment on education. We are applying for a grant by the end of this month to actually purchase e-bikes. We feel pretty good about it. And we're including in that grant we're calling it a bike education clinic. And we plan to have a 1-day bike fair and include components of education and safety. So we heard comments about, I think it was maybe Councilmember Jimenez or someone else who said, yeah, we really got to educate people on this, Councilmember Penrose. So just wanted to mention that, yeah, we've included that in the grant. So we're looking, if we get that grant, we'll be definitely putting on this big bike clinic day when we get there. So those are all my comments, but we will, not that should change anything now. We have our work cut out for us and we'll come back with the information asked and roll it around again. Thank you.
I would just say, I think we want to, put some boundaries around how much time we spend on this, because if a budget is passed in June 15 that approves $700 million or more for active transportation, money will start flowing, and we certainly, will be wanting to submit grant applications. So, you know, I think we want to deal with this in a timely way, at least be done by the end of summer. Latest. Yeah. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, in terms of what you just said, Mayor Riddick, I do not want to rush this. I think this is a big enough, important enough task that if it takes us a year to decide, then that's what it needs to take us. But I raised my hand because of what our city manager, Bob Nisbet, just said. Every one of his points was really interesting and very good for me to hear. I would like at our next public discussion for you to make those points again, Bob. I'd like more of the public to really understand that point of view, and your experience is very valuable. It's why we hired you. And, you know, this would be a wonderful thing if you could be part of a presentation that we do at our next meeting. That's all.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Penrose. I wrote the 6 or 7 points down that I made, and I'll certainly do that. I didn't realize it was you hired me because of my experience. I thought it was because I ride a bike a lot. No? Okay.
That too.
And you're cute.
Be careful.
And you're esteemed, esteemed, using the term loosely, but esteemed.
Second training is coming up. Okay, so staff feels like they have adequate direction. That's what I'm hearing. So I think we want to move on to item 1E, which was the item that was pulled. And Mr. Dowdy, you're staying here and talking about that one too, I'm guessing.
Well, you're this as the esteemed director. I am still here, but Maz is also here. So,
well, maybe the best strategy is to ask Councilmember Rarbach, since you asked for this to be pulled. Do you just have a comment about it, or do you want like a full staff presentation and all that stuff?
I'm happy to just give a comment. I'm not opposed to the staff recommendation, but I did want to make some points. This project, which is the repair of the outfall near the Kehoe watercourse, is the result of a long line of poor judgments, mistakes that have made it so that our drainage issues are really serious. And I just want to emphasize that when we do hire the design firm, or that is the staff report recommendation, that we are willing to think outside the box and not have more concrete poured for the sake of concrete poured. That one of the options that Jimmy Benjamin has brought forward is diverting the drainage to an area where you could reduce the impact of the water in after a large rainfall. That we need to think creatively. This is part of another bigger project that's on our 5-year CIP, which is the entire Kehoe watercourse diversion, which might end up costing more than $10 million. And we should really think comprehensively about the whole project. And I just wanted to make that point, that piecemealing and trying to do a little patch here and there is not an intelligent way to deal with the drainage issues in the city. So as I said, I'm not opposed to hiring SWA to do the design, but I think we should keep an open mind as to creative solutions to do it. That's all I have to comment on.
Do we have a motion on this item?
Sure.
Is Maz going to respond to that?
Maz, do you want to respond to that?
I can respond briefly. So yeah, there's definitely a larger effort that will be needed for our overall needs for stormwater management and master planning work, which is incorporated into our CIP. I would say that this particular section and project we're looking at is it's a segment of pipe that has broken off, and I agree that we're not looking at solely just going in there and pouring concrete. So that was part of the selection process, was to look at to see what all options are out there, and that's what the consultants would do, is provide us some different options and look at analyses and come up with an option that will work for everybody. We also will require a lot of permits. This will go through Army Corps of Engineers, stream bed alteration agreement, Fish and Wildlife. So there will be a lot of folks that will be looking at it and commenting on it. So yeah, we agree that this is a repair that's necessary, and it will be something that's important to preserve the surrounding homes, as well as the end of that Pillarcitos Avenue. So that's a critical piece, because we do have a segment that's failed, but also understand that we have that a bigger need that will require more review and oversight, and that is, as Councilmember Harvey mentioned, that it is part of the long-term CIP planning.
Thank you, Maz. I appreciate what you just said.
Yeah, I think staff did a pretty good job on the RFQ, and the proposal was very detailed. It talks about options. There are studies and permits, so this is not just a fly-by-night fix of a pipe. In fact, when I first read it, I thought, well, that seems like a lot of work for just fixing a 4-foot section of pipe, because really the fix for that neighborhood is going to require a watershed approach. I mean, even just reconfiguring the channel, if you don't deal with the watershed, the lower and upper watershed, isn't going to be a real long-term solution for the problem. And just the reconfiguration of a channel alone without anything else is still going to be 10 times as much as this pipe fix. So, I hear what you're saying. I've heard, over many years what the neighborhood is saying, but I think we have a sound approach here. So I'm going to support the recommendation for 1E. Robert, were you going to make a?
Yeah, I will. I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to award and execute a professional service agreement for the Pillarcitos Avenue Kehoe Watercourse outfall repair project to the most qualified and responsive proposer, Schaeff and Wheeler Consulting, civil engineers of Santa Rosa, California, in the total amount of $217,653.
I'll second that.
A roll call, please.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Rohrbach?
Yes.
Councilmember Jimenez?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Penrose?
Yes, before I vote, I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Rohrbach for the question. I think it helps to make decisions that the city makes, that the council makes, more transparent, and it gives them a better understanding of why we're spending $200,000 on a proposal. So my vote is yes.
Yeah.
Mayor Knight?
I'm a yes.
Motion carries.
So do we have any commission and committee updates?
I do not believe so tonight. Jill is actually on what she called a working vacation, so she's not here tonight. And Matthew made some comments earlier about upcoming Park and Rec meeting on the Smithfield project.
Okay. City council reports. Reports out of any of your local boards and commissions?
I attended the MCC meeting, but Claire made it very clear what was discussed, so I don't see any point in adding to that.
Yeah, she made an excellent report. Although Harvey, it might be good if, when we're pursuing a little more information on the e-bikes, maybe you could bring it up at an MCC meeting, consult with the MCC about what they're thinking about this stuff, if they're thinking about it at all. I'm guessing they are, but.
No, I'm not aware of anything that's on a future agenda about e-bikes, so I can bring it up.
Yeah, maybe you could bring it up. That would be helpful.
Sure.
The vice mayor and I and the city manager attended the progress seminar sponsored by SAMCETA, the County Economic Development Agency, a couple of weeks ago in Santa Rosa overnight. And our city manager made a presentation on a panel on homelessness and talked about what we're doing in Half Moon Bay with the homeless motel, and it was very well received. And there were a couple of other panels like on housing and things. And then last week we attended the Peninsula Division of the California League of Cities legislative briefings and met with our State Senator Josh Becker and our Assembly Member Mark Berman just to update them on things that were happening in the town, and heard from them about some of their priority bills, et cetera. And at SAM, we adopted both the operating and the collections budgets for the coming fiscal year. And that's really all I got.
Yeah, I attended the San Mateo County Library, JPA, meeting and had a presentation of their budget. They're doing very well economically. Opening new libraries, having ribbon cuttings, really expanded their programs and are heavily into equity, and attended the Progress Seminar and went to Sacramento.
And then on future agenda items, before we actually have an open discussion, last time Councilmember Rarbach asked for us to agendize a discussion of potentially endorsing the Fix-It San Mateo County initiative for independent oversight of the sheriff's office. And I had told him that we were going to be discussing it at our public safety meeting last week. But I actually asked for that to be rescheduled because I didn't want to shortchange the discussion at that meeting. But I felt I had to be at the SAM meeting that evening to discuss a couple of items that seemed to me and staff to be kind of controversial. So we're going to reschedule that meeting so that we can, have a robust discussion, not just on that topic, but the others. So we will be talking about that, Harvey. Apologize. I don't know if somebody got to you and said, here's what happened, but it was felt that we didn't want to shortchange the discussion of public safety. That said, if you have comments about that, or if anybody else has items they'd like to suggest for future agendas, now's the time.
I appreciate what you just said, Mayor. I thought I heard from Bob on our one-on-one meeting that this would be a presentation on an upcoming meeting, probably in June. Am I right?
Yeah, if I could add, and Matthew can jump in too. So also what happened after the comments the mayor made about having to cancel the public safety subcommittee, Matthew met with the group who asked the council to do this. And in that conversation, kind of align themselves on what they wanted and what the right approach would be. And so out of that came kind of like, well, do we go back straight to council or do we go through the public safety subcommittee? And also what came out of that was their own scheduling, and their comments to Matthew was that coming back to council by July would be fine. But then we're working on that because we only have one July meeting, and so maybe June 24th. And so, yes, I'm just underscoring these comments that I made to Councilmember Rarbeck. Matthew, did I miss anything on your meeting with the group that asked the council to do this? No.
Yeah, so I didn't know about that piece. So coming directly to the council is fine too. I don't think it has to be at public safety. It's just that we had the public safety meeting coming up.
Yeah.
When we had this discussion last time. So.
Yeah.
It's June 21st, by the way.
June 20. I keep saying the 24th. My fault. Yes, June 21st would be that meeting, right?
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we can adjourn this meeting.
Take care, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.